Hello, everybody. My name is Oliver Bruce. I am the host of the Micromobility podcast, and I'm joining you here from New Zealand, 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I love micromobility, and I am really excited to have this conversation with David and Eric from Faction. So, welcome, team. It's really lovely to have you here. Where are you dialing in from, each of you?
I'm in Quebec, Canada, currently.
Fantastic.
And I'm 2 hours north of where Erick is located right now. So I'm a little bit more up in the cold and in the snow here in Quebec, Canada.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, look, for folks who are kind of new to this, I do normally do interviews for the podcast, and I'm going to go into the backstory of companies and how they kind of came to the micromobility industry. I've had a number of conversations with folks from Faction. Mike has been on a webinar, and we've had a huge number of conversations privately. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation with you two about Faction and where you sit in the ecosystem and things like that. A couple of housekeeping things before we get into the conversation. We're going to talk for about 35 minutes, and then I will take some questions from the audience and put it in. We really want to encourage that part of the conversation, because I think in general, this is what most people are here to join for. Both Eric and David have a lot of wealth of the industry. And so I really encourage you, if you'd like to ask questions, to drop them into the questions and answers section, and we'll make sure that we get to that. I will be monitoring that as we chat. So if there's a specific question that you want to ask and it's short, and I can include it in the chat as our conversation as we're going, I will try to do so. So just drop it in as it comes up, and otherwise we'll come back to it at the end if that works. Yeah, but look, otherwise, I think we should get kicked off. I'd love to start, really want to kind of go back a little bit and just understand the kind of the roots of how Faction even came to be. I think that would be a really useful part of the story, that contextualizes where we are, and also where you sit in the industry as well. So can you just talk me through, maybe Eric, you're the best person to do that, the backstory of how Faction came to be, and then we can kind of get into what you do today and things.
Definitely. First of all, I want to start with my personal experience before Faction. So I've always been a bike enthusiast, and I've worked 6 years in a bike shop. And we were right about the time where mountain bikes are being introduced on the market. And I was seeing the level rate, the failure rate they had. And to me, it didn't sound right. So I was young at the time, but I had a lot of interest in mechanical. So I went to the university as a mechanical engineer. And with that purpose in mind, when I started, everything I was studying was to design bikes. And I first was hired and worked half of my career in a bicycle brand. And so I was kind of on the opposite side of the service. So I was actually designing a bike for a bike brand, and kind of learned the ropes of that for many years. And afterwards, I did a small 3 years in a consulting service company, helping startup companies making their new product a reality. And I used to be in an area that has a program related around aluminium, so the Aluminium Valley, so in Saguenay, Canada. And it taught me a lot about the interest of being an entrepreneur, and also seeing what they were doing wrong, and kind of took the leap of faith and started my own business, which was Faction Bike Studio back in 2010, in order to essentially provide fulfill my needs, where what I like was designing bicycle. And as part of an employee of a bicycle brand, I was doing a tiny amount of research and development, because I was tied up into marketing, sales, production, sourcing. So it came about like joining my passion of designing bikes. And we first started the company, me and an industrial designer. And a bicycle is a mix of these two that interacts together because there is no like structure to put over the chassis. So the chassis needs to also be beautiful. So Faction came along. So we started two, and 13 years later, we are at 35 people. And we do basically everything from the idea until it's ready to be mass produced in factories, mostly in Asian factories.
Excellent. That's really useful context. And David, how long have you been with Faction? Just to give context as well.
Yeah, I started with Faction 2 years ago, and prior to Faction, I was as Erick, I was working for a bike company as a marketing and also sales director. And before that, I was working in a bike shop for many years while I was studying and racing bikes. All kinds of bikes. So passion bike is a true passion, and I'm pretty happy now to be working in a service company that is working with a lot of brands manufactured. So we're kind of it's really interesting because we're at the kind of at the center of the industry. It's really helpful to see trends emerge and how they evolve, and also get the feedback from various side of the industry. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing that I've really gained in the conversations that I've had with your team has been you really do sit at the kind of at the crux of the industry, and I'd love to get Erick just a couple of more details. So you're at 35 people. You know, how many bikes in general would you say that you've designed at this stage, or bike systems would you say you've designed at this stage?
In the span of that first 13 years, around like 400 different projects.
Yes.
And it varied from like the years. So early on, we were really specific about making like the core of the bicycle design, which was like industrial design and CAD modeling. And we were also interacting with the factories. And as the year got along, like we kind of like spread out the services as the need, like our clients. It was quite easy to figure out which service to offer next because our clients were expressing their needs. We could like offer like something, and my idea has never been to do something the way I used to do them, but to refine how to do them, be more efficient at it, and really stimulate innovation through the product design. And the most often question that I get is like, everything you must have been designing the same bike over and over. And I said, no, like every time it's a new challenge, and I don't see the end of it. Like, even though I've been doing this for 30 years now, I still have a lot of ideas, and I'm being stimulated by the needs that our clients have.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to discussing the where we're going, because I think that's a really relevant part of this conversation. But at this stage, what percentage would be electric versus kind of acoustic bikes in terms of what you're seeing coming through? Like, and what's the ramp been like? Like, when did electric become a thing, and then when did it kind of go from being like a little thing to a big thing?
Our first electric bike dated back like probably the second year of our foundation. At that time, it was really small. So back then, we were doing a lot of high performance bicycles, carbon fiber, full suspension. And personally, as an engineer or like as a bike racer, I'm obviously interested in those high performance machines. But from the engineering standpoint, the bikes that are being mass produced to a low cost represent a lot more engineering challenges than these bikes, because these bikes, money is no object. You can throw everything at it. And these are considered, like, for us, the easier project. So e-bike like slowly grew, and it became like a big part of our business. I would say 5 or 6 years ago. And right now it's representing more than 70% of our the contracts that we are doing.
Yes. And when you, of the kind of 400 or so bikes that you've done, what percentage would you say have been shared versus like shared in the either being station-based or free-floating versus a sort of personally owned electric, or sorry, a personally owned bike?
In our case, so it doesn't represent the market, of course, but like I would say that 90% of our business has been for personal use.
Yes.
And 10% has been for bike sharing companies, but mainly as troubleshooters and problem solvers with them, and not as bike designers.
For the shared services.
For the shared services. Not that we don't want to, it's just that the opportunity has not been there yet. So it's something that they usually do in-house, or they like speed to market for them is quite important. Their business model doesn't necessarily focus all their attention on the bicycle itself, but as the general service that they are offering, and they need to go really fast. So sometimes they will start with something existing on the market, and they will adapt it as the year go along and solve like issues related to failures or safety reason. But we would be amazed, like we have a lot of ideas on how to make bike sharing great.
Yes.
And during my past career, I was involved in a bike sharing project, with one of the first one in 2007, 2008, and it was really amazing.
Yeah, we'll come back to bike sharing because I think that's a really interesting part of the story. I do also want to contextualize the rest of the industry as well. So maybe can you give between the two of you, give me and the audience a bit of a kind of a rundown on like how has the bike industry worked? How did it used to work? Because I think that there's been a kind of, I think micromobility has changed the structure of the industry a bit. But how has it traditionally worked? And then have you seen it change through the growth of micromobility? So the rise of electric and that, if that would help. David or Eric, whichever one you think is the most relevant to take that.
Yeah, and maybe we can both contribute.
Yeah.
Like I've been like seeing it for a long time, and it's basically operating at the same kind of usual level. So many bike brands are not manufacturers, so they are usually own a brand and distribution, and they are the one with the basic idea and the market to cover, and they rely heavily on Asian suppliers to make their dream a reality. With all the new companies, the new startup that has been more like tech style startup company. So they tend at looking at like how many users they can obtain, and they are shaking up a bit the industry, like forcing it to do business differently, which I think is a really good thing. But the downfall for that, it's there's some like traps that they are falling into really easy. And I often refer to, you're not building a piece of software that you can do a over-the-air update. You're putting a genuine hardware piece that needs to be troubleshoot, and not like troubleshoot from the start, from the first part of the design, in order to have a reliable product at the end.
Yeah, I think that definitely the micro mobility was able to present bike as an option for transportation a lot better than the general bike industry. So that's something that is amazing, because it brought a lot of new cyclists to ride bike on a day-to-day basis. So that's something that was amazing, because in the past the bike company were kind of not really looking at those entry-level e-bikes. They wanted to do business as they used to, selecting Shimano complete system or Bosch complete system, and going for price point that was way more expensive. and then that was a huge opportunity that that new company took advantage of. We can think of Rad Power or Electric that are doing really great in the US right now with a really aggressive price point and a different way of doing business, a different way of communicating to the end consumer, to show different feature and to be less focusing on components and performance. So that has been really interesting. But maybe the piece of the puzzle there that is different is that they haven't been spending as much time on product development, and sometimes that shows in the durability of the product or the ergonomic, the usage. So, but it's good. They made a push in the market. It did had some. They shake the industry, and things are changing. Now their product, they've made some various iterations, so they're improving their product, and we see the big brands of the bicycle industry that are changing how they work. We see Specialized now coming out with a product with a hub motor. They've been always doing a mid drive, so they're attacking a lower level price point. So we see that there's a merge that's starting to happen. The push of those entry level bike brands has done some great things, bringing more people to riding bikes, and then having an impact on the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of dig in on that, what you were saying around that traditionally, like you would pick a bike, maybe you'd pick it. My understanding was that there was a thing called was it called the Golden Book or something like that in Taiwan? And then you'd sort of turn up to Taiwan and you'd say, this is the frame that I want this, this is the components that I want, and build this bike for me. And that would be kind of how that would come together. And my sense is that micromobility really breaks that model. Like, it becomes harder to do kind of componentized, like there are still modular elements to building an e-bike, or shifting towards kind of electric, but that there's more integration required, and so it is a different challenge for designing. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. Especially with all the since we have like electric bikes, there's already a next level of complexity, technically speaking, and usually you have a lot of electronic layer and user interface. So the bikes themselves has been increasing in complexity, and you need to, like, for people like us who are designing bikes, it's quite different from what it was 15 years ago. And also for bike makers, it's representing a big challenge for them. I would say the weakness of our industry, that it's probably a bit too easy to start up like a new bike brand, because there's a network of vendors in China that are being specializing in manufacturing bikes for others. And they are using, like, for them, it's just showcasing what they can do as a manufacturer to these potential clients. But it becomes what we refer to as open model. And these open model, which is a proof of concept of what they can do in their factory, are becoming available for smaller brands to start their business. And usually it doesn't come with the investment of development, doesn't come with the investment of tooling. And it's just a bit too easy, and that's why there's so many bike brands in the industry. But if you converge everything through the main suppliers in Asia, there's not many companies who are able to build such bikes.
Yeah. So everyone kind of builds off the same base. There's a question here from someone, which I think I'm just going to ask now, which is, who are the current leaders in the e-bike industry, and what are the kind of unique differentiators for e-bike companies as they exist?
Well, if we look at let's say the North American market, there's as I was saying, there's a lot of new brands that have been kind of had a big impact on the market. So we see that let's say Rad Power or Aventon have been new players that have been really aggressive and have been gaining huge market share compared to the industry like Trek, Giants, and Specialized. So I would say in the US, Rad Power and Aventon have gained huge market share, coming up with the aggressive price point and really bikes that are inclusive and for product category that relate really to the mass and to use as either mode of transportation or leisure and less focus on performance and racing. So I would say that those new brands that we're seeing with also a different business model, so selling direct to consumer. So for them, it was easier to have a rapid growth because the bicycle industry going the usual model, selling to a distributor and then to bike shops. There's, as Erick was saying, that it's so easy to create a new bike brand. The bike shop have a huge selection of brands to select from to put in their shop. So if you come up with a new brand, usually they're already tied up with the partnership and they're not able to take on a new brand. So those I would say those two, let's say Aventon and Rad Power, have been making quite an impact recently in North America. And in our work, we do market research and data analysis for product development projects. So we saw that the rise that they had in the recent years was pretty significant and also unusual compared to the regular bike industry.
Totally. I mean, I can see that the bike, I mean, that's one thing that I've noticed, right? Has been, as someone who, like, I do the podcast and I'd like to think that I'm like pretty plugged in the industry in the sense that I talk to a lot of people, and there have been a number of companies that I am like, I've never heard of you. And then it turns out that you do 150,000 bikes a year. Like, you are a very substantially sized e-bike company, and what they've been, you know, Electric is one of the examples of this, right? Like, they didn't ship they shipped 8,000 bikes in 2019. They shipped 150,000 last year. They've got the Electric XP is the best-selling e-bike model in America. And I, you know, to tell that story has been amazing on my side, but I just, they do entirely direct to consumer. They ship a bike that's already folded down, but fully assembled in a box to people who own RVs. And that's like, and, you know, when you can, you know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why I think that's interesting, but that was kind of like the tip of the iceberg. Turns out when I did that episode, I've had a number of other people reach out and say, oh, there are bigger companies than that I didn't even, you know, that nobody's heard of. And I think that kind of direct to consumer model has been one that has been super interesting, because everybody who I kind of talked to who's been in the traditional bike industry is like, that's a terrible idea. Bikes need to, you know, it's one thing to be able to ship a bike to someone. It's an entirely different thing to be able to ship a bike to someone and 5 years later the bike is still functioning, that the brakes are replaced, that that everything is still working, like that it's tuned and safe and things like that. So can you talk me through, I want to get into the, like, what have you seen in the industry where you've obviously been around, you've designed 400 bikes, like, what are the mistakes that people make? And I want to start maybe with that conversation about direct to consumer, because I think that's one that feels like a bit of a, it kind of encapsulates a lot of probably the challenges that you might be seeing in the industry. But can you talk me through, you know, what you see in the kind of like the primary mistakes that folks who are doing D2C might be facing?
Yep, it's I would say that generally speaking is not like really understanding why you're designing and building and distributing that specific bike, and not understanding enough the consumer need. And to what you were alluding or referring to earlier with like new brands coming in, having a different business model, different price structure, getting so much traction so quickly. You know, for sure, like historic bike brands that have been doing like analog muscular bikes, they have that part of the business to protect. So they've been growing their business ever since
Mhm.
on these bikes. They have a dealer network, and even for them to bring, even though they know that electric bikes is a big part of the revenue now, they still have to dilute their effort, both time and money. And both muscular bike and electric bike, new companies can like reinvent how the bikes are being distributed. Like, it's no longer through IBD. They can reach, they have like a direct
IBD is
connection
an
with the end
independent
user.
bike dealer. Just,
Yeah,
I didn't know that
sorry
part.
about that. And now we have a direct line of contact. Like even the independent bicycle dealers needs to reinvent themselves in offering something that they can, and they need to take that new reality in account. I don't think they will disappear. They are needed. There are some cons on direct model distribution as well. So at some point, the industry will probably converge into a mixed model. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And if we are referring back to your initial question, which was what are the common mistakes that the companies are doing, is trying to get products too fast on the market, speeding up. So as they are doing so, the risk goes up drastically, and there's a lot more consequences afterwards. It's really hard, and you need to patch these problems. And having a product that you don't understand the real need or the real user benefit can lead to designing a bike that is not meaningful on the market and won't sell. Um, we've also in some ways creating like volume through obsolescence of product, like building like a new model that is replacing
Yes. Yeah.
the bike 2 years or 3 years after. I'm a big proponent of like making bikes that suits the market. So understanding, doing market research, really understand the deep-seated needs of the end user and making products that will be there, 6, 7 years after. And we've been successful about doing so on even performance segments. So I think that products can be long lasting and well designed to suit like the needs of today and the needs of tomorrow.
The other thing as well, I mean, when we were kind of setting up for this conversation, you'd said that there was a number of examples that you could give of when things like when you have in-field product failures that I think
Yeah.
but I find it. Dave, you want to explain that part that you were mentioning?
Yeah, that's we have, as Erick was saying, we have a lot of a client within the micromobility industry where we're helping them solve problems, and since their bike is a portion of their operation, and so they have to work on software and all kinds of stuff. So usually they'll try to take shortcuts to come up with a solution. And if they take an existing product from a manufacturer and do small modification to make it relevant for them, that can lead to a lot of infield problem, because let's say the load case of the bike hasn't been really analyzed to make sure it will sustain the load. Let's say it's it's a transport, it's a bike to do, let's say, a delivery, or to be used as a shared bike, but it hasn't been designed to sustain those type of usage. Then you have bikes all over the world that are that can have failure, and that leads to huge problems for the brand or the company that is behind those products, because they have to find a solution, send product a little bit everywhere, have some labor costs to do modification, potentially have people hurt on the bike and get sued. So there's definitely a lot of downfall. At first, when you think about, a bike is not that complicated, then we'll take that solution and it will potentially work. But bicycle is a vehicle, and a vehicle can can lead to serious injury. So for us, we're always really careful, and we make sure to explain to our clients the benefit of doing good product development. Sometime at first it might look like a longer a timeline to come up with a product, but you save a lot of time, energy, and dollars down the road.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's quite easy to understand when we think about it, because most products that are being available, in Asia, are products that have been designed for consumer end product and not some commercial use.
Right.
So a bike share has many users on it, and it within like half a year, it can have the same impact as the whole life of a consumer product,
Yes.
because it's been ridden like that much often. So we are quite interested in that and understanding, okay, what does the bike go through? So there have been many cases where we instrumented the bicycle and did a typical ride in order to understand what was the loading scenario for like a typical trip for a bike, which is usually around like 1.5 to 2.5 miles.
Yes.
And but over a certain time, we are basically adding up these 1.5 miles trip in a year. So gathering data gives us a lot of insights on how to design the product. And the most popular material to build these bike share is aluminum, and aluminum has fatigue issue in it. So it's not something that is bad. It's just that like over a number of cycles, the product has a finite end of life. So a normal consumer product is designed for, let's say, 5 to 10 years. And in order to get, maybe you will test at 100,000 cycle. And for bike sharing, you may go 10 times that. So
Right. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, the one thing that I think has been super interesting about the industry has been the first iteration of micromobility when it was scooters, right? So as those kind of those crappy ES2s from Segway, which were clearly built for consumers and just had some IoT attached to them. And what you've seen is the robustness of the vehicles is now, the life on those things was 3 months versus nowadays where it's like, we're realistically going to get 5 years out of each of these scooters. There are small parts that we'll need to change out, but the wonderful thing that I love about micromobility is the ability of the industry to like iterate quickly on those things, because you can adjust, and the life cycles are super short, and you don't have, it's expensive, but not like preposterously expensive to be able to shift out some parts of your fleet if you have to replace the areas of it, versus, for example, like trucks or big cars or something like this on the fleet. Now, hey, look, I'm conscious we're at 35 minutes or so past the hour, and I do have a number of questions coming in, so I want to be able to go to them in a minute. There is one thing that I would like to just ask you both, which is, can you take me through what your typical like consumer journey, like customer journey is? So what would it look like for a client if they were to come work with you? How does that typically work? And how would you work with a client if they were to come to you? Maybe David, if you can take it.
Yeah, I'll do the first part, and I'll switch the engineering part to Erick. So usually, let's say a client come to us with a project to build a product lineup for the next 3 to 5 years. So we start by discussing goals with him in the market that he wants to target, product category that he has right now in his product portfolio. We look at trends of the market and where the different part of the world where they're distributed. What are the categories that are trending that could be attached to their brand, or that are already integrated in their product offering. From then we select category that we analyze. We analyze the trend, the sales potential, their position within the market. That way we can build them a product portfolio for, let's say, 3 to 5 year plan. And and from there we can start the product development. So we have, let's say, that study of the market needs and the trends. This will stay live and active throughout that 3 to 5 year plan to make sure that every time we start a frame development, we select the right product category that will bring the most value for them and for their targeted audience. So that's kind of the market research part of
Yes.
thing and the business planning. And then it comes to product development and industrial design. So I'll let Erick take on that part.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
And I can just do a quick introduction to what David was saying. Traditionally speaking, we were doing like the engineering based on a well-established need from our client.
Mm-hmm.
With David's joining us like 2 years ago, we've been able to expand and have the client come to us and discuss about the global company strategy and have no product in mind. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big change. And where we have the most successful intervention is when we have like a long-term planning with them instead of just seeing it one model at a time, understanding the whole picture and
Mm-hmm.
establishing like a global strategy over 3 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to designing a bicycle, we first do a requirement document where what the bike needs to be achieving. So that becomes the key criteria on which we will design and then validate the design once it's being prototyped. Usually at first we will build what we call a technical package, which is the geometry of the bike. The geometry of the bike consists of the ergonomy placement of the rider demographic that we're using, the handling characteristic based on the type of terrain, cycle path, and areas that the bike will be ridden on. Suspension, so we can expect to see more and more micromobility products with like double suspension in order to get, of course, one of the benefits that comes to mind, like a more comfortable ride. But
Yes,
it's
totally.
also a safety feature, keeping the wheels on the ground. And as the speed are going up and up, like suspension is not just for comfort, it's for safety as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then once we have the mechanical package with all the elements put in place, we do a lot of brainstorming session and industrial design to refine the shapes of the product and what what the end user tastes criteria are. So we often seek for inspiration in other type of industry with
Mm-hmm.
products that these people might own. So that gives us like a general sense of what they like.
Yep.
Once we have like a proposition that it's being accepted by the client, we will often like produce 2 or 3 options that he can choose from. And then we jump into 3D CAD modeling. So computer software that enables us to bring the bike as a virtual prototype form to check all the clearances, the functionality, how it assemble, disassemble. We do support activities where we do design for manufacturing. So understanding how the bike will be produced, which way, what are the sub process, and understanding the cost driver of that design. So you're not designing like a $700 bike the same way you are designing a $900,000 bike.
Yep.
We need to be excellent at owning the manufacturing process. And before doing all of that, the factory is often already identified from the get-go because different factory means different manufacturing process.
Yes.
And we have to adapt like our design style according to that. Once we have that, there's a virtual validation for strength, so called FEA, finite element analysis, where we can
Mm-hmm.
prove the strength of the bike, but also over the span. So we consider fatigue, so we can predict quite accurately how many cycles the bike will be able to do statistically. Then the production drawings, the relationship with the factories, first prototype validation, testing, conformity. And once all the bugs are completely gone and we go to the pilot run, and afterwards the bike is being able to be mass produced. And this is usually where we are out
You hand
of
it
the
off and
project
let
when
them
we're
run with
starting
it.
a new one. So
Yeah.
we make sure like we are not delivering a bunch of 2D drawings to our clients. We're delivering a bike that can be mass produced and exempt of bug and like that will have like a high lifespan.
And do you find that like the companies that you're working with, sorry, the factories that you're working with, because I imagine it's hard. Like if you just turned up in Taiwan and said, hey, manufacture all these bikes for me, they're like, who are you? Who are you? And you know, like does the fact that they're coming from you in some ways pre-qualify you, or sorry, pre-qualify them to be able to work with some of those factories?
We are matchmakers between
Yes.
the factories and the clients. So we are neutral in a sense. So we do a lot of factory assessments. So there's no like bad factory. There are just factories that are not well suited for our clients' needs.
Yes, I hear you.
We've been able to work with over the years probably 40 different factories, and we know their strengths and weaknesses. So each time a client comes to us, we will propose, like if they don't have a factory, we will propose like 3 choices and make a recommendation, but ultimately they do the final.
Fantastic. Well, we have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna jump in at this point. But thank you. That was really useful context. So we have one here from Javier, which is thoughts on which model is going to be more successful in shared micromobility. Was it free floating or station based? And I'm curious if either of you have any input because I've got ideas on that one.
Yeah. It's a hard one. Like I feel that dock station bike have a more social acceptance from the fact that it's a new landscape in the city, and we want to be sustainable as in the industry. So all the scooters that were kind of like everywhere in the city and parks, like in the river, I don't feel that this is giving a good image of what we have to offer as a micromobility company or like industry in general. Dock bike have like a weakness where you're limited to the number of spaces you have, and that can be really annoying for the user if there's no space available and you need to go to the next station. So they both have pros and cons, but I would say that like dock station have probably for me the is the most viable one.
Yeah.
And there's some hybrid models where near a docking station you can have some free zone where you can leave the bicycle there, non-dock. And
yeah, I've seen the ones run by PBSC or Lyft in the States, like Bay Wheels, for example, allows you to it also has a lock on the bike, so you can take a bike from a station, you pay more to not drop it back at a station, but then to like lock it to something. And I think that model works pretty well because it gives you that freedom and flexibility of like, hey, I can pay more to go to exactly where I need to go to, or I can pay a little bit less and drop it back to this more convenient location that's in the middle, which is like more convenient for everybody else. And I think that and it's charging the bike. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think. Oh, I've got many more questions, and I'm going to, unless there's yeah. So I have one here, which is can you explain why the new tech brands such as VanMoof and Cowboy are struggling so much to build a profitable business model?
Yeah, well, maybe I think like VanMoof did a lot of custom and design that was really proprietary. So I think that definitely needs a lot more investment in tooling and development. So for sure, and at the same time they're trying to be aggressive with a price point that is fueling the demand. And and making sure that they have a growth strategy. So during the bike boom, I think the demand was really high. Probably their marketing strategy and their business plan was providing a high value product at a really affordable price point and focus on volume, since they had such an investment made on product development, and also they're really implicated in the production. So I know like they have their own facility in Asia, and so that's a lot of cost that is that they need to be responsible for. So I think they need to probably to come to a level of volume of sales to make this really profitable, and is a lot higher than other brands that are maybe focusing on different part of the sales experience instead of making everything custom and everything proprietary. Then the level of profitability to reach for them is lower. So I think that that's probably one of the reasons why it's difficult at the moment. If
And the
volume...
same could be said for for Cowboy as well, for doing. I mean, it's not quite as proprietary, I'm aware, but I mean, it's still a relatively proprietary bike, right?
And they're using the business approach that tech companies are using, and that takes a lot of like capital to go through the first stage, and it's basically a battle to the end against our competitor to be the sole one there and have your place. So it's a lot of investment upfront and a lot of risk, and they hope for profitability in the future.
Yes. Yeah, we've got other questions. I would love to come back to that one if we have time at the end. According to Faction, who will be the next, or what will be the next technological challenges for operators of the self-service micromobility vehicles? If that makes sense. Next technological challenges that you can see coming for micromobility vehicles.
I think, well, going back to the dock OS or dock station, I think that one thing that I really saw that is a value is the multi type of vehicle that are that can be docked. So that I think for micromobility as a shared service, I see this as a challenge for the industry, and someone that's going to be able to manage this in a good way is going to be really successful. So bringing all the like the scooter, the mopeds, and the bicycle, all the type of unifying all the offering, I think that has a lot of value, and also having a structure to be maybe an hybrid of dock, and also, as you were mentioning, believe that you could also pay a premium to have it secure where you want it. I think that could be a huge game changer.
Eric, anything to add there?
Maybe offer something like different offerings, so depending on your needs. So commuting on the weekdays and doing grocery shopping on the weekends. So being able to tailor the offer and not trying to do everything with one single bike.
Right. So the question from what could you add any insights on the European e-bike competitive landscape? We kind of touched on that with Cowboy and Van Moof, but curious on anything else that you could offer.
They are at the forefront for sure. The acceptance has been high. I feel that it's the landscape who's going to drive the products, and not the product that is going to drive the use. So just like the city centers of big cities are shutting down for cars, will create the demand and more products. So these companies are, at the beginning of that change that will happen over a year, but that change will happen really fast once it gets going. So we will need a lot of bikes and a lot of bike brands. So
yeah. Anything else you'd add, David?
No, I think that as Erick said, the switch from the shift that's going to happen from cars in downtown cities that's gonna be less popular and less accessible. That's gonna make a huge shift from what we're already seeing. So a lot more option for utility bike, cargo. Maybe we will see trends coming from North America to go to Europe, like the mini cargo bike, which is not right now. We don't see as much in Europe as we see in the US. So that might be a switch that we can see going from North America to Europe. From Europe, we were seeing a lot of cargo bike, like long front loader and long tail bike coming here in North America. So it's
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by the short cargo bike? You mean like a turn GSD sort of thing?
even shorter. Let's say like the specialized haul that was just launched a
Oh,
couple weeks
yeah.
ago, or the ride runner, rad runner bikes type of bike. So like short wheelbase utility bike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating. Okay, cool.
Only
I'd love to see that happen.
A big ecosystem of commercial bicycle, tricycle, quadricycle for the delivery companies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a question here about competition or route to competition for the handful. Oh, is there any competition or route to competition for those handful of main manufacturers out of Asia, or are we stuck in the supply chain configuration for the future? In other words, are we always going to be reliant upon Taiwan and China, or is there going to be other new manufacturing like hubs emerging elsewhere that could change the supply chain configuration?
The start, like there was already a shift before COVID, and COVID accelerated it for sure with like all the supply chain issue that we've been facing. Of course, it's going to require the end user to make a compromise on cost, because we won't be able to come close. But with automation in the factories, we might get close, but there's going to be a premium.
Yeah, I think definitely there's we're seeing it in Europe. It had gained a lot more momentum than in North America. There's a lot of production happening in Portugal or in Eastern Europe. Companies are investing. New factories are opening or gonna open in the near future. In North America, we've been having a lot of discussion about the production facility for large volume of bikes. I think right now it's just probably it's not as popular of a conversation that a couple of months ago, because the bike industry has a lot of inventory right now. So a major capital investment are maybe not as possible right now. That so we might have to wait a little bit for North America for the production side of things to evolve. But it's definitely a trend for the long term, and we see this as definitely happening.
And the edge that we have over Asian manufacturer is on manufacturing innovation. Like what is being produced right now in Asia, it's the know-how of American and European companies that brought their knowledge in Asia. So if we try to make the same bicycle in North America or Europe, it's going to be always become a question of labor, and it's going to end up being more expensive. But if we innovate in terms of how we are manufacturing a bicycle, there's a lot of opportunity to be cost effective.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question here, which kind of is a follow-up to that. Europe's bike OEMs have been moving quickly to reshore much of their bike manufacturing infrastructure, which is, I think, what we were talking about with Portugal there. In your opinion, what needs to happen in North America to get the same level of excitement and movement? So you kind of referred to it as it's capital, etc. But like, is there anything else in terms of, are there other regulatory things, or is there, is there a better tariff protection, something like that, other things that you could kind of point to and think, oh yeah, if we had those things, we really think that would drive the...
There's knowledge that has been lost, so that needs to be regained. That should be relatively easy. it's there somewhere, but needs to be regained. The second one is labor. So that's why like we need to rely on automation. And automation, we need to rely on high volume. So like these things needs to be happening. So it's not something that can be started small and grow organically. It needs to be big from the get-go, and it requires huge investments.
I
David?
think that I think with the throughout the years in the past there was a tariff protection in North America for bike manufacturing, and when that came down and the tariff disappeared, a lot of factory closed in North America. So as Erick said, a lot of the knowledge has been lost, and right now there's not a lot of factory producing bike in North America. A lot less than in Europe. In Europe, they still had some operation and knowledge and production that was happening. So I think it was one of the reasons why it's picking up speed faster in Europe, and it is going to happen at one point in North America. It's just going to take longer. And right now, with the economic situation, it's slowing it down a little bit. But as I said, it's a trend that is for the long term for sure.
And
I had
the
oh,
trigger
sorry, you
will
go ahead.
probably sorry about that. The trigger will probably be laws or regulation initiated for the country, or in order to produce an incentive for companies to jump into that.
Yeah, I have there was a gentleman who's been in the industry for a long time who's been talking to me about that there are new production methodologies coming that I think you kind of were referring to in terms of manufacturing innovation, where we can utilize elements of the auto supply chain that already exists in the US, where obviously you've just got mass volume of componentry and it's cheap, that you can then feed. How can you tweak small elements of the auto supply chain to effectively like provide for the bike industry so that you get really cheap manufacturing opportunities, which I think is really cool. And he some of the stuff he's talking about would be very innovative if it did happen. Now we've got one final question, which is, do you have? You've got somebody from here from Quebec who said, comment on if you could comment on micromobility trends, particularly in Canada and Quebec, and that you have observed over the last few years.
We are at like the heart of, if we take, for example, PBSC, which is in Montreal, has been there for a long time. The bike is kind of an amazing piece of hardware. From the fact that there's still bike running that dates back from 2008 in Montreal.
Yeah, wow.
And it shows, like, with the commitment that was made early, how the bike can be long lasting and appreciated by the users every day for the last 10 years or more, 15 years. Like the most challenge is the weather for sure. Bikes right now with the components that we have are not designed to go on roads with abrasive or salt in the winter. So but if we take the same example with cars, our cars can go in such condition. So that's the change that needs to happen. It's not the frame the problem, it's more about components. But the market is also quite small for such a use in hard condition.
Fantastic.
And it's even harder in Canadian than in Scandinavian countries, because they don't use abrasive, like they just compact the snow.
Yeah.
It's less harsh on the equipment than what we have in Montreal, for example, Toronto. Yeah,
fascinating. Well, look, hey, thank you. That was such a fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate both of your time. And we will be taking this webinar and making it public, so we will be putting it up online for folks who are maybe watching this at this point. But yeah, hey, David, Erick, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, if folks do want to reach out, the best way to do that is just via the Faction website.
There we have a contact section on the Faction website, so drop us a line.
So www.factionbikestudio.com. Thank
Fantastic.
you for having us, Oliver.
Yeah, thanks,
You're
Oliver.
most
It was a
welcome.
pleasure.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you, everyone. And thank you so much for joining. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.